Now I ask Mr. Farzad FALLAH, a human rights activist and doctoral student at the Geneva Graduate Institute, to take the floor.
Well, thank you very much, Chair. Ladies and gentlemen, it is only apt and proper that we sit here today examining the role and effectiveness of UN human rights mechanisms, with a particular focus on the situation in Iran, especially ever since September 2022. After my co-speaker, co-panelist, I might kick off the session with a dose of strategic pessimism, building on the statements of my co-presenter here, which I think is paramount to any sober and serious analysis of international phenomena. What is clear is that there is not much need to depict, not much need for me to depict again an image of the tragic list of human rights violations occurring on a daily basis in the country, which sadly includes inter alia violations of fundamental rights such as freedom of expression, peaceful assembly, religious freedom, women's and minority rights, capital punishment, the right to self-determination, and the treatment of political prisoners, journalists, human rights defenders, and so on and so forth. The numbers and figures were reviewed a moment ago. We all know this. But along those lines, it is correctly argued, in my view, that such circumstances connect the Iranian struggle to its counterparts across the world. In other words, the particularities of the local is simultaneously a replication of the global. Take the case of Iran, where the brutality and wickedness of the incumbent authorities is a part of the way of life, and try to find a similar story elsewhere, be they oppressed by foreign occupiers or by their own governments. Sadly, it is no difficult endeavor. Think of Afghanistan, Palestine, Syria, Ukraine, Myanmar, Yemen, and so on. In addition to the organic link between these instances of local resistance against tyranny, these instances are also connected by the fact that some form of a UN mission of inquiry or fact-finding mission has been set up in order to basically do the impossible. Finding the truth where it is obscured and obstructed, and revealing lies where it is abundant. To refresh your memory, allow me to remind you of the mandate of the fact-finding mission on the Islamic Republic of Iran, pursuant to Resolution S35/1 of the Human Rights Council of 24 November 2022, which portrays the purview of the mechanism. It reads, and I quote, A, to thoroughly and independently investigate alleged human rights violations in the Islamic Republic of Iran related to the protests that began on 16 September 2022, especially with respect to women and children. B, to establish the facts and circumstances surrounding the alleged violations. C, to collect, consolidate, and analyze evidence of such violations and preserve evidence, including in view of cooperation in any legal proceedings. And finally, D, to engage with all relevant stakeholders, including the government of the Islamic Republic of Iran, the Office of the United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights, the Special Rapporteur on the situation of human rights in the Islamic Republic of Iran, relevant United Nations entities, human rights organizations, and civil society. End of quote. I would say it is a very ambitious and yet a very narrow mandate. It is vital to remember, however, that such mechanisms are hindered by a paradox which they themselves cannot overcome necessarily. We cannot possibly put the whole burden of not only engaging with political developments, but also approaching fundamental legal questions and societal transitions on a humble vessel such as a UN mission of inquiry, the likes of which are habitually pressed by the urgency and the desperation of the situation, the grotesque complexities of international politics, and tarnished by bureaucratic mazes within the UN itself and other stakeholders, budgetary impediments, understaffing, etc. Not only that, but we also cannot expect to delegate the handling of fundamental paradigms of the current international legal order, if there is one in the first place, to a mission of inquiry, so long as the restraints and so-called assurances installed in the United Nations Charter, among other instruments, such as the principle of non-interference and sovereign equality, prevail, we repeatedly encounter situations of explosion of expectations by the public and the ensuing frustration over the very existential utility and benefits of the UN system as a whole. In other words, we find before us sometimes a paper tiger. As such, a fact-finding mission is arguably set up for failure from the outset, tormented by the schemes and barricades and red tapes of the target state, or maybe because we ask the wrong questions from it. And while this macabre dance continues between internationalism on the one hand and sovereignty of the state on the other, bodies pile up in Kurdistan and Baluchistan, children die in Gaza, civilians are attacked in Aleppo and Kharkiv, and girls cannot go to school in Kabul. And yet, we turn to the missions of inquiry on the premise that when the dust clears and the opportunity finally arises, we have a relatively reliable account and testimony before ourselves, so that we may finally reconcile and take refuge in the assurance that some sort of solace and restitution can follow. Not for us bystanders, of course, but rather for the helpless victims who weather the storm of tyranny and totalitarianism everywhere in the world, every day. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Farzad.